Good morning. This is an introductory study of Hegel's Science of Nature. Today we're taking up the second main division, physics. First, a brief review. As stated, Hegel's absolute science, the universe is the whole's knowledge of itself in and through us, has three parts, or four if you include the phenomenology or introduction. Science's necessary preliminary, which takes you out of Plato's cave of separateness and multiplicity into the unity of absolute knowing and the concept, unfolded in logic and the foundation of absolute science and the real sciences of nature and spirit. So, in brief, we start with the concept, the truth and reality, in logic, in pure thought, the inner, and due to polarity of necessity, we advance to the outer, or the concept as and in nature, self-externality, space, and matter, which, though necessary, is a contradiction, an unresolved, quote, contradiction, whose destiny is to cancel or set itself aside. Quote, nature has vanished, as Hegel says. Nature has returned into the inner, logic or thought, but now as spirit, enriched by nature, qua the human animal body or organism. Spirit being the absolute truth as the unity of logic and nature, thought and matter, the ultimate end and consummation of absolute science, containing all that preceded, all moments within itself. Now, the science of nature has three parts: mechanics, or matter, physics, or qualified matter, and organics, or living qualified matter. In mechanics, we saw the first overcoming of nature's externality as space and time, with matter's forming itself into the solar system. First, the deduction of matter itself from place and motion, then the deduction of the forms of relative motion in finite mechanics, then lastly, the deduction of the solar system itself, or absolutely free motion, from gravitation, the true concept of matter, comprehended as the unity of attraction and repulsion, which alone can explain why, e.g., the planets do not fall into the sun, and why and what the four principal bodies of the solar system are, and their respective three motions. Now, physics, our focus today, is divided into the physics of the universal individuality, that of the particular individuality, and that of the total individuality. The key to physics is in the word individuality, that is, concrete or qualitative individuality, which was lacking in the abstract or quantitative material individuality pertaining to the matter in mechanics. Here, we are simply tracing the becoming of individuality, where bodies are able to be distinguished from each other, and which is only completed in nature's final division, organics, or life. Two important points concerning logic and the concept, and how philosophical or absolute science differs from the empirical sciences. As Hegel says in paragraph 246 and Zusatz, quote, "As the philosophical science of nature is a comprehending, begreifen treatment, it has as its object the same universal as ordinary physics, but explicitly. And it considers this universal in its own immanent necessity, in accordance with the self-determination of the concept." He continues, "Not only must philosophical science be in agreement with our empirical knowledge of nature, but the origin and formation of the science of nature presupposes and is conditioned by empirical physics. However," says Hegel, "the course of a science's origin and the preliminaries of its construction are one thing, while the science itself is another. In the latter, the former can no longer appear as the foundation of the science. Here, the foundation must be the necessity of the concept." As Hegel says and clarifies, quote, page 10, Miller, "The philosophical science of nature takes up the material which physics has prepared for it empirically at the point to which physics has brought it, and reconstitutes it, so that sense experience is not its final warrant and base. Physics must therefore work into the hands of philosophical science, in order that the latter may translate into the concept the abstract universal transmitted to it, by showing how this universal, as an intrinsically necessary whole, proceeds from the concept." 2. The other all-crucial key to the science of nature we mentioned last time at Miller, page 80, is this, quote, "We shall pursue the solar, planetary, lunar, and cometary natures through all the further stages of nature," end quote. Now, since logic and the concept undergirds nature and its science, mechanics correlates with being and its categories, physics with essence and its categories, and organics with the concept and its categories. As Hegel says at paragraph 247, Zusatz, quote, "In physics, the determinations of the concept now receive materiality, and we now enter logically into the sphere of essence, where these determinations of reflection, hence of matter, now develop as forms, namely, identity, qua the sun and light, difference and opposition, qua the moon and rigidity, and the comet and dissolution or fluidity, and ground, qua the earth and earthiness." Okay, briefly, in physics, we see matter manifesting and revealing its inner form and qualities. Thus, in the Universal Individuality, U, we first have the four bodies of the solar system and their qualities, then the four elements, and finally, the four elements meteorological process. In the particular individuality, P, we see the qualities which first enable individual bodies to be distinguished from each other, namely specific gravity, cohesion, sound, and heat. Finally, in the total individuality, I, we have the unity of the first two, namely, first, shape and magnetism. Secondly, color, odor, taste, and electricity. And thirdly, chemism, the anticipation of life, as the processes of combination and dissociation. We will begin with the physics of the universal individuality. Keep in mind, again, that individuality and its becoming is the main theme of physics, indeed of the whole science of nature. Hegel observes that matter has individuality only insofar as it is determined and determines itself within itself, and further, that matter wrests itself free from gravity and will thus now begin to manifest itself. Also important is that by universal individuality, Hegel means the earth. In fact, the first subsection here on the free physical bodies and qualities ends with the earth. That is the universal individual, which will be the subject and theme of the rest of the science of nature, which will just deduce, deepen, and specify the earth's remaining inorganic and organic determinations, culminating in the animal organism, the soul, and subject. Okay then, so the physics of universal individuality has three parts. A, the free physical bodies and qualities. B, the earth's elements. And C, the process of the elements, or meteorology. So, the free physical bodies, as we now know, are the sun, moon and comet, and the earth, or planet. And matter, in its first qualified state, and corresponding to the identity of the logic of essence, is light, which correlates with the sun. Important is that light is a form of matter. Indeed, light is the, quote, self-contained totality of matter. It is the, quote, pure existent force of space filling. Its being is absolute velocity, contra Einstein, a pure materiality which is everywhere present, end quote. As for the sun, Hegel says that the sun is eternal and had no beginning, contra the theories of Laplace and Kant and others, which is true also of the earth, which is due to the necessity of the concept and its three moments. In Hegel's words, page 89, Miller, quote, this body, the sun, is the primordial uncreated light, which does not arise from the conditions of finite existence, but immediately is, end quote. And at page 280, quote, the creation of the earth is eternal. It is not an event which once happened. It is an eternal generation, for the infinite creative power of the idea is a perennial activity. Next, again in accord with the concept, we have the bodies of opposition, correlated with their qualitative state or quality, namely the lunar body or moon and rigidity, and the cometary body or comet and dissolution, neutrality, or fluidity. And lastly, the body of individuality, or logically ground, namely the earth or planet, which, as the third, is totality and contains the other moments within itself. the Earth's qualitative state being simply earthiness. As we said, from now on, we will be occupied only with the Earth and its differences. As Hegel says, quote, "What follows is nothing but the explication of this individuality, i.e., the subject." What is truly remarkable is that Hegel seems to indicate in the following that the Earth is the centerpiece of the entire cosmos or universe, against Copernicus and today's scientists, and in agreement with the Bible. Quote, "The planet is the veritable prius. The sun is the servant of the planet, and sun, moon, comets, and stars are mere conditions of the earth, or the earth's adornments. The sun has therefore not produced the planet, nor thrown it off. On the contrary, the whole solar system exists together. If there is a question of pride of place, we must give the place of honor to the earth we live on. We have now come to stand on the earth as our home, and not only our physical home, but the home of spirit too." End quote. Also see paragraph 549 for more. In section B, the Earth's elements, Hegel is in complete agreement with the Greeks in holding that everything in the earth is derived from only 4 elements: air, fire, water, and earth. This, contra today's scientists, whose so-called elements are not truly elements, as they are abstractions of the 4 elements, which are based again on the concept. Air is the universal element, logically of identity. Fire and water are the elements of opposition, of difference or particularity, and the earth is the individual element or totality. Quote, "The earth is the power which kindles the other 3 elements into a process which it also sustains." The 4 elements correlate perfectly with the 4 free physical bodies and their qualitative determinations. Hegel elaborates on this on page 106. He says, "At first, it is only we who determine the body of individuality as having the moments of the solar system within itself. The next step is that the planet must posit these determinations itself. In the planet, the bodies of the solar system are no longer self-subsistent, but are predicates of a single subject, the earth. These elements are 4, arranged in the following order. Air corresponds to light. It is passive light which has sunk to the level of a moment. The elements of opposition are fire and water. Rigidity, the lunar principle, is no longer indifferent, existing by itself alone, but as an element entering into relation with an other, namely the individuality. It is an active, unstable being for self, which is in ceaseless process, and thus is liberated negativity, fire. The third element corresponds to the cometary principle and is water. The fourth is the earth again. As the history of philosophy teaches us, it was the main importance of Empedocles to have been the first, definitely to grasp and distinguish these universal, basic physical forms. Lastly, we have C, the process of the elements, or meteorology, a process responsible for all the bodies on the earth and their determinations, and for all that goes on in the earth with respect to weather. For example, rain, thunderstorms, earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, tsunamis, hurricanes, and tornadoes. 2 points. 1. Contrary to the view of our scientists, the four elements have an underlying identity. For example, air and water in the phenomenon of rain. That is, air and water are identical, so that water is transformed literally into air and vanishes, and vice versa. When it has stopped raining, the water does not remain in the atmosphere as latent. Quote, the form of vapor vanishes altogether. 2. There is also an identity and tension between fire and air. The Earth's core is the lunar or fire element, while its atmosphere is the cometary, fluidity, or air element. Hence, the Earth is a composite and reflection of the moon and comet, and their tension or interaction is responsible for volcanoes, earthquakes, and so forth. Now we'll advance to the physics of particular individuality, where matter's qualitative dimension gets deepened. Here, bodies are able to be distinguished from one another, which is a prerequisite of individuality. There are four qualities which allow for this distinguishing and individuation, and which concern the way a body's parts are related. The four qualities are: 1, specific gravity or density, which is a characteristic of every body on the earth. For example, gold is 19 times heavier than water. It's 19 times as dense as water. 2, cohesion. Cohesion concerns the way a body's parts are connected, which is revealed when the body is struck. Bodies are thus brittle, malleable, ductile, and so forth. 3 and 4, sound and heat, which both deal with the negation of the parts of a body. Sound is an ideal negation of a body because the negation, the simultaneous vibration of all the parts, is temporary. Heat, on the other hand, is a real negation of the body and its parts or qualities because the body is utterly destroyed by heat. Sound and heat are an anticipation of the ideality or idealism which first occurs in chemism and gets completed in life. In life, where all the parts of an organism are members, are ideal and not real, as they continually negate themselves as independent entities for the sake of the whole organism and its self-preservation. With respect to sound, Hegel devotes many fascinating pages to the relation between harmony and numerical ratios. I wish to quote just a sampling of his profound understanding. Quote, since tones are a mode of our sensation, they are for us either pleasant or unpleasant. This objective mode of harmony is a determinacy which enters into this mechanical sphere. What is most interesting here is the coincidence between what the ear finds harmonious and numerical ratios. It was Pythagoras who first discovered this coincidence, and this induced him to express determinations of thought, too, in the form of numbers. Harmony is based on the ease of concords. and is the felt unity in difference, the concept, unity of opposites, like symmetry in architecture. But can harmony and melody, which so enchant us, appealing to our feelings and passions, depend on abstract numbers, you may ask? This seems remarkable, astonishing even. But only this determination is present, and we may see in it a transfiguration of numerical ratios. The simpler ratios which form the ideal basis of harmony are those which are more readily grasped, and these are primarily those based on the number 2. Okay? This is the basis for the piano construction, guitar, all the instruments. As Hegel says, half of the string vibrates to the upper octave of the note of the whole string, which is the fundamental. If the lengths of 2 strings are in the ratio of 2 to 3, or if the shorter is 2/3 the length of the other, and therefore performs 3 vibrations in the same time as the other performs 2, then the shorter gives out the 5th of the longer string. Finally, we have the synthesis of the universal and the particular, the physics of the total individuality, which has 3 subsections. A, shape, or Gestalt. B, the particularization or properties of the individual shaped body. And C, the chemical process of combination and dissociation. Of most importance in this section is that each of the subsections illustrate the concept and the unity of opposites, namely, qua shape and magnetism, the electrical process, and the chemical process. And the difference between magnetism and the other 2 is that magnetism, the magnet, exhibits the unity of opposites in just one body, while the electrical and chemical processes both require 2 bodies. A few remarks. First, about A, shape, Gestalt. With shape, matter becomes a freely determining individuality, where form manifests itself through its own activity, in opposition to gravity. As Hegel says, page 160 to 161, quote, whereas inwardness previously revealed itself only through an outer stimulus and as a reaction against it, here, on the other hand, form manifests itself neither through an outer force nor as destruction of materiality, as in sound and heat. But without stimulus, the body contains in itself a secret, silent master geometrician, which, as an all-pervading form, organizes it both outwardly and inwardly. This limitation, both outward and inward, is necessary to individuality. Thus, the surface, too, of body is bounded by form. It is shut off from other bodies and shows its specific determinacy without external action in its quiescent subsistence. A crystal, diamond, indeed is not mechanically compounded. Nevertheless, mechanism is resumed here, an individual mechanism, just because this sphere is the quiescent subsistence of the separated parts, even though the connection of the parts with the center is determined by immanent form. Body so formed is removed from the influence of gravity. Body grows, for example, upwards against gravity. The examination of natural crystals reveals them to be articulated through and through. However, we have not soul here yet. This we'll find in life. Why? Since individuality here is not yet objective to itself. And that is the difference of the inorganic from the organic. Individuality is not yet subjectivity. That's what we're going towards. If it were, the infinite form, the concept, which differentiates itself and holds its differences together, would also be there or for itself. This takes place only in the sentient creature. But here, individuality is still submerged in matter. It is not yet free. It only is. As stated, magnetism perfectly exhibits the concept and the unity of opposites. In Hegel's words, page 163, magnetism is one of the determinations which inevitably became prominent when the presence of the concept was suspected in specific natural phenomena and the idea of a philosophy of nature was grasped. For the magnet exhibits in simple, naive fashion the nature of the concept, and the concept, moreover, in its developed form as a syllogism. C.F. Hegel notes, paragraph 181. The poles of the magnet are the sensibly existent ends of a real line, of a bar, or also in a body, extending further in every dimension, especially the planet Earth as a whole. But as poles, they have no sensible mechanical reality, but only an ideal one, and they are absolutely inseparable. The point of indifference, their center point, where they have their substance, is the unity where they exist as determinations of the concept, so that they have meaning and existence solely in this unity, i.e. the poles. Polarity is the relation only of such moments. Some remarks on B, the particularization or properties of the individual-shaped body. The four conceptual properties of individual bodies are: 1, color, corresponding with light and air. 2, odor, which corresponds with fire. 3, taste, correlating with water. And 4, electricity, which correlates with earth. Concerning electricity, which also exhibits the concept and the unity of opposites, Hegel says the following, page 226. Electricity, quote, makes an appearance wherever two bodies come into contact, especially when they are rubbed. Electricity, therefore, does not merely attach to the electrical machine, but every pressure, every blow, says Hegel, produces electrical tension. Contact, however, is the condition for this. Electricity is not a specific, particular phenomenon which occurs only in amber, shellac, etc. Electricity attaches, on the contrary, to every body in contact with another body. It is only a question of having a very fine electrometer to convince oneself of this. The angry self of body comes forth from every body when excited. And now just a few remarks on C, the chemical process, which also exhibits the concept and the unity of opposites, and is on the threshold of life. The process consists in combination of two opposites, resulting in a neutral product, in which all the properties of the two bodies have vanished, been negated, and their subsequent dissociation where their properties are reinstated. So, we move from separation to unity, and from unity to separation, which is precisely the concept. As Hegel says, we would be in the presence of life if this movement was self-initiated, but it's not. Someone has to bring together the two bodies and elements to produce a chemical reaction. The chemical process is best illustrated with the interaction of an acid and a base, or alkaline, a plus and a minus, as in electricity and magnetism. For example, we have heartburn or acid reflux, stomach or hydrochloric acid within our stomach. And to get relief, what do? We neutralize the acid by ingesting magnesium hydroxide or milk of magnesia. Hegel beautifully summarizes the chemical process thus. On page 233, quote, says Hegel, to understand the general position and nature of the chemical process, we must look forwards and backwards. Chemical process is the third stage in the process of shape. The second was differentiated shape and its abstract process, electricity. We also had a process in shape before it achieved completeness and neutrality, namely magnetism. If shape is the unity of concept and reality, then magnetism, as at first only abstract activity, is the concept of shape. The second stage, the particularization of shape within itself and against another, is electricity. The third stage is the self-realizing unrest of the chemical process, as the veritable reality of the concept in this sphere. As in magnetism, in chemistry, there is one form which sunders itself, separates itself into differences, and exists as a unity. Yet it does not stop there. In magnetism, the difference is manifest in one body, as we said in the beginning. In electricity, each difference belongs to a separate body. Each difference, positive, negative, is self-subsistent, and the whole shape does not enter into this process. Chemical process is the totality of the life of inorganic individuality. For here we have whole, physically determined shapes. Bodies enter into the process not merely as having odor, taste, and color, but as being odorous matter, tasting and colored matter. Their relation is not one of movement, but of alteration of the entire different matters, the vanishing of their distinctive characteristics. The abstract relation of the body, which is its light, is not only abstractly, but essentially this particular relation. The whole corporeality, therefore, enters this process. Notice, it's the whole corporeality, all the features, characteristics, determinations, properties of the body. And the chemical process is consequently the real electrical process. Thus we have the whole shape, as in magnetism, though not one whole, but distinct wholes. The two sides into which the form separates itself are thus whole bodies, such as metals, acids, and alkalis, etc. Their truth is that they enter into relation. The electrical moment in the process is that these sides separate themselves out to have their own independent existence. This did not happen in magnetism. The inseparable unity of magnetism likewise dominates the two sides. The identity of both bodies, which makes them return once more to the magnetic relation, is absent from the chemical process. Okay, we will continue this tomorrow when we will also begin our study of organics. Thank you.